But anyway, I practiced all kinds of drawings of various characters, including the Disney characters, which I admired the Disney comic strips very much. And so one day I noticed that there was an ad in the paper that Disney's was hiring artists for tryouts. So I had had some practice in doing the Disney style of drawing, and so I whipped out some cartoons and sent them out to Disney's, and they looked at them and decided that I had the technique and good enough to ask me to come out and try out. Everybody tried out under the same conditions. It was to see whether they were animators, could ever develop into animators. So we had to work on the drawing of the characters and work over a light board and do in-between drawings, which I'm sure most people understand nowadays in animation. The animator just draws key poses in an action, and in-betweeners fill in the necessary drawings that go in between. Some of the fellows were extremely good at it. Oh, I was good enough to get by. I got hired. I could see it wasn't my kettle of fish. And another thing, I had hearing trouble because when I was a kid I'd had measles and my hearing was gradually deteriorating. And all the years that I worked on the riveting gang in the railroad car shops had damaged my hearing quite a bit, so that by the time I got to Disney, I would be having a lot of problem to talk over the telephone to people. Now the in-betweeners and the assistant animators always had to have telephone connection with the animators so that they could call up and discuss the different problems that comes up with these in-between drawings. Well, I wouldn't have made out. But at that time they had a problem with the story department, in which the story department had to have guys who could think up good gags, and they'd come up with a story idea. They'd send a resume of the story over to the animation department to see if any of the guys over there could think of something funny that could happen in that story. So they were sending over those little synopses of the stories, and the guys like myself that was working in animation, we would turn in gags. Well, that was right in my alley. I was turning in gags and getting paid for them on the side. And finally I turned in one that was so good that Walt Disney himself paid me $50 for it and told me that he thought I should be working in the story department. Thank goodness I got out of the animation and into the story department. I was 6 years in the story department. That is making up the little storyboard sketches. They would have a big wall like this and have the storyboards. You've seen pictures of these storyboard sketches. And we would make up the whole story and draw it up in storyboards. So I was getting quite a bit of instruction on how to construct stories and how to stage action and all while I was doing that. And so when I left the Disney studio and started working on comic strip work, comic book work, why, I already had quite a bit of experience in how to construct stories and how to stage them and time the gags and the dialogue so it would come in the right places.
Så här såg Barks på sig själv i tiden för andra världskrigets utbrott. Fast just då slutade han hos Disney för att försöka sig på hönsuppfödning. Men förlaget som gav ut tecknade serier med Disney-figurer bad honom redan 1942 att skicka in både teckningar och text. Och då införde han något nytt i genren. Långa, sammanhängande historier uppbyggda som klassiska sagor istället för bara situationskomik. Det blev succé. Kalle Anka såldes i fler exemplar än något annat seriemagasin någonsin i USA. Men arbetet var mödosamt.
I would generally draw about 4 pages in blue pencil and put it up on my, pin it up on my wall. I had one of those big Celotex 4x8 panels, and I just put about 4 of those panels up in blue pencil and then sit back and look at it and read it from a distance. At that time, my eyesight was good enough. I could read blue pencil across the room, little figures that high. And I'd read that script. If it just seemed to slow down at any point, then I could take and erase a whole panel and draw it over again and make it look better, make the dialogue come out sharper and faster. And then start in and ink it with black and white, with ink. I was depending a lot on the color people back at the printing plant to make it interesting.
Did you suggest colors also?
I did a few times and seemed like they never got the message. Yeah, they would come out with purple forests in the background, yellow ocean and things like that. But I couldn't do anything about it. They always managed to be readable anyway, so there was no use in complaining.
Did they anytime change your plates or your basic drawings?
Yes, at times they did. That was done in the editorial office, usually. They would have to have a room to put an advertisement in, and they might just take the bottom 2 panels and throw them in the wastebasket and put an ad down there for BB guns.
That was not good.
It was awful.
Carl transmitted the Disney characters to the world in a way that film never could, through the magazines and the comic pages and so on. It was a really enormous contribution that was only a few people, and very few people even here knew much about.
What would you say was his trick with his stories?
Oh, he was just a great storyteller. He was also a great, he had an enormously great ability to tell the story in pictures, in just a few panels of pictures, which you have to do in comics, of course, to stage scenes in such a way that every scene had a little story within it that you could follow. So it was a very visual kind of art, and really quite amazing.
What really constitutes classic Barks is the type of story he wrote after he had left the Disney studio for a while, had assimilated the lessons of animation from his 7 years there, and experimented a bit with comic books, trying Donald in adventure stories, which nobody really had ever done before, and eventually hit his stride being able to combine the kind of movement and visual comedy of animation with a almost pulp fiction or popular fiction kind of adventure story and the sort of historical research that Barks got into doing when he began to research early works like The Mummy's Ring and even Pirate Gold in back issues of his favorite source, the National Geographic magazine.